if you're prepared for something, meaning, hey, worst case scenario, this could happen. I put these measures in place. Now I don't have to think about it. Now I can live my great life and I can do it. Because why? Because worst case scenario, I know that if there's a grease fire in my house, I have a fire extinguisher close by with the proper fluids in it to take care of that situation. Or my doors are locked at night, so at least I'm going to get a warning if somebody's trying to get into my house at night, and I can sleep more soundly.
2, 1, 0.
I'm like a Pollyanna with a lot of things. I always expect miracles. I expect the best to happen, but I'm not delusional. Maybe even slightly jaded when it comes to understanding that there are some bad guys in the world, starting from my childhood, from experiencing domestic violence for myself, and actually being from Israel and being witnessing wars and terror attacks and living in a country the size of El Salvador that is surrounded by huge amount of countries that just want to annihilate her. So I am more hyper vigilant when it comes to protecting myself and my family, and I really like my guest today. There is something about people that have been through some army training or martial art training that is so appealing. Most of them, I mean, there is always an exception to the rule, but most of them, especially the ones that are really cool and really strong and, have this like don't F with me type of energy, they have like the best hearts. And every time I'm around this type of people, it's almost like my feminine body goes into a sigh, like, I'm safe, you know. And my guest is one of those people. He is so incredibly dangerous when it comes to bad guys, but also so incredibly beautiful and humane and kind when it comes to helping people and his family, and just beautiful, beautiful to witness. Tim Larkin is teaching principles and methods to minimize the chance of violence entering your life. He's been through Navy SEAL training. He's got a company that can produce firearms. He's got trainings about using violence to prevent violence. Got an incredible TED Talk. All the resources are going to be in the show notes of this episode. And trigger warning, we talked about some heavy things like illegal immigrations and how many, within those really good people that come in, there are some people that are not so good that are coming in the millions, if not in the thousands, to the US, and how it's going to maybe change the surface of the US. We talked about my experience with the rise of anti-Semitism on October 7th. We talked about how a woman should protect herself. How do we protect our home? What is the best thing you can do to protect your home today? And it's kind of like, it's a very cute thing to do. And more and more and more. So I hope you will enjoy yourselves. If you do, please leave me a review. Contact me. I would love to hear from you, and recommend this episode to someone who needs to listen to it. And now, without further ado, on to the show. Hi there, Tim. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Yes. Before we begin, can you share a bit about yourself, your passion, and why you do what you do today?
It's funny. It's evolved over the years, but it really started out where, as a young kid, I really wanted to understand about dealing with the problem of probably the biggest threat everybody has in their mind, which is a bigger, faster, stronger individual forcing you to do something you don't want to do using violence. And for some reason, as a little kid, I grew up in the military. My dad was a officer in the Navy, so we grew up on military bases. So I was surrounded by Marines, young Marines all the time, and they taught us everything. When our dads were deployed, so I was immersed in that. But what's interesting is now, after doing this for over 35 years professionally, my real change has been to focus on people, to make them understand what violence is, what is the tool of violence, and it is a tool that anybody can use, when it would ever be appropriate to use it, and more importantly, how to live a life that minimizes the chance that you would ever need to use violence or violence would come into your life. And so that's really where I've kind of evolved. And that's where being able to talk to, audiences like yours, where I'm hoping, if they don't know my name, that's a good thing, because normally 70% of the people that come to me after the fact, after something's already happened to them. And so by doing something proactively like this, maybe there's one or two things that you and I will cover today that will cause somebody to pause and maybe make a better decision.
Right. So we live in this world where violence is considered to be extremely bad and don't come near it, and all you need is love, and love is all you need. Do you think we are raising a softer generation, or we are already a softer generation than we used to be?
I think it depends where you live. The reason we are here in the US, the reason that up until probably 2 years ago was very much the approach, is because we are so good at using violence. We live in a really interesting country. We live in a country that is surrounded by two huge seas, oceans. So it's very hard for somebody to invade us. We have neighbors to the north and neighbors to the south, even though we have issues with the cartels, where we have regularly pretty much friendly, neighbors on either side. So the chances of us being invaded or having to deal with what a lot of the rest of the world has to deal with is not prevalent. Less than I think it's 1.5% of our country participates in the military. So very few people in our population understand what the threat is to the country, or what we'd even do if something ever happened. So we live kind of in a fantasy world here. Most of our cities, even, we know where the bad parts of the cities are, and we know how to avoid them for the most part. But what's interesting is violence has kind of creeped back in. We saw civil disruption, during the last 2 years, which was unthinkable here in the US. We saw people that were calling for police help and being told no help was coming. We saw things happen that we never thought would happen in our cities. That only happened somewhere else. I know you said you're Israeli descent. And when I go to the Middle East and I go and, visit my friends in Israel and other countries, the awareness and the potentiality for violence is very different among those people, and how they act. And so I think a lot of it is this fantasy that we have here in the U.S. that you can live a peaceful life and all this, and there's no place for violence, and violence is never the answer. And yet that just goes against human nature.
Hmm. So a lot of things are changing, especially now that the borders are open. And, not only like, cute families with kids are coming through the borders. There are also drug dealers and people from other nations, and probably some people from different terror organizations. If the borders are open, everybody can come. The good, the bad, the ugly, everything can come through. Do you think we're going to experience more violence in the US because of that?
Over the years, I've had to work with all the agencies. I did a lot of work with the Customs and Border, and particularly the border, their version of special operations. And I'm very familiar with that challenge down there, especially on the southern border. I don't know what's happening leadership wise, that we've allowed border security to become political, and we've allowed it to become, this is truly a national security thing, and truly a safety thing. Nobody's saying that we don't have immigration. It's legal immigration. And somehow we have put it in that it's okay to do illegal immigration all of a sudden. Like somehow these people are needy and desperate. And yes, there are those people.
There are those, of course. Yes.
The people that my friends are all worried about are the people that you're describing, young military-aged males from unique countries that don't normally. I mean, the increase in Chinese males coming to the U.S., military-aged males coming to the U.S., I think it increased some ungodly amount, like multiple thousands of degrees more I think we had something like a couple hundred a couple years ago, and last year we had well over 30,000 come in. Now, the interesting part about a lot of these guys, and it's not just the Chinese ones that are coming in. What we focus on here in the U.S. a lot is the fact that they're all getting these benefits. We're flying them all over the country. We're giving them money. They're going in these things. Those aren't the people I'm worried about. Those aren't the ones, because nobody's talking about these other groups. Now, imagine if you truly are desperate and you're leaving a country and you want to start a new life, and the host country says, hey, you know what? We're going to fly you wherever you want to go in this country. We're also going to give you equivalents of $10,000 in a credit card, and we're going to give you housing. Why wouldn't you take that? There are a ton of people that aren't taking that. They come in, they get processed, and they disappear. They don't take advantage of any of these offers, and they just go, and nobody knows where they are. And that's the one that those are the groups that nobody's talking about. We're not talking about the vast majority of supposedly good people that are coming in, and there are a lot. We're playing games that we can't afford to play right now with our safety, and yet we are. And so I'm sure there'll be a backlash. I'm sure there'll be problems politically later down the road. I think this year is going to be a very challenging year for us, regardless of how the politics works out. Nobody's going to be happy. So yeah, it's been an interesting year for me as far as my interviews and preparing people and what I do with my clients, and really making really smart decisions is going to be really key right now to avoid violence.
Right. I would have been probably one of the people that would have come to you back in the days, because I experienced domestic violence where my ex, just one day he was very verbally abusive, but then one day he became physical and really hurt me. I ended up in a hospital. And then I had to pick myself more like emotionally, psychologically, than physically, because I feel like the emotional violence was even worse for me. But one of the things that I did to recover from myself and to let go of all this like blame, shame, and anger was I studied MMA and Aikido, because at that moment I was like, nobody will ever touch me ever again. And that was extremely empowering for me. And now I'm happily married to a wonderful man, and we have a child, and I'm really out of shape. And I don't remember anything of what I learned. I'm still kind of like hyper vigilant. I can react in emergency situation when needed. But I'm like, just like for somebody like me, what would be your advice? Should I go study martial arts? How do I protect my home? What should I do?
Well, it's twofold. Domestic violence survivors, it's a tough situation because, again, I would imagine the reason you sought out training during that time was because you didn't feel safe. Obviously, somebody who you trusted, meaning you married the man, and at one point the relationship was great. They betrayed the trust at the most basic level. So letting anybody else back in, you're going to want. Now, listen, I'm not I'm merely talking from years of working with people. I am not
I
a
did a lot of
counselor. I'm
work on
not.
myself. A lot of
Yeah,
work.
and so there's that. Now, happily, you're in a great situation. You've got a great family life. You're vigilant, but again, like you said, hey, I'm not as focused. Well, it's just because your family's safety hasn't been threatened to the point to where you feel that, to where nothing's really happened to spur you at this stage of the game to start training again. And that's not bad. It's not a bad thing. It's just something to recognize. So your motivations for coming to training this time are going to be very different. It's going to be because you do have this great lifestyle, and you're worried about that black swan event where violence might enter your life.
Yeah, but also as Jewish Israeli, after the events of October 7th, where you know babies were burned in their homes, like just good people like living their lives. All those crazies came, and like and the massacre in the music festival that shook my country and to the core, because we always had to like you know okay, there is a war. We know who we're facing. We never had people come and just like murdering people just to murder them in their sleep. It was not a war situation. It was so much more disgusting. And then what's going on in the US universities and all the, people going protesting, they don't even know what's going on. They don't even know who they're backing up. They don't even know, or they're just like chanting stuff they don't even understand. They chant from the river to the sea. The river and the sea mean the extermination of Israel. And then they don't understand the extremist Muslim agenda to actually take over the whole world. Everybody who is not Muslim, and it starts with Jews going to Christians and everybody else. So experiencing this as a I follow the Jewish faith as a Jewish person here in the US is it's very difficult. Like my whole community is being on alert right now. There is security everywhere. There is mega security in every event, and people are, some people are picking up firearms. So there is this. I feel like since COVID, this under feeling of like there is a threat coming. There is something something bad is happening. What do you think about that?
I think what everybody had was the equivalent of um, it's an analogy I've used for years, that you're driving down a two-way road and there is a yellow line in the middle, and you're going to stay on your side of the road and the other person's going to stay on their other side of the road, and it works great, you know, until somebody doesn't pay attention to that. Somebody just decides to literally go across and run right into you. And you're going, well, that's insane. And then you sit there and realize, well, wait a minute. I literally have driven my whole life on the assumption that the person on the other line isn't going to do something ridiculous, crazy. But the only thing that I'm going to protect myself with is a painted line. We quickly realize that these painted lines can be ignored like that, and your world can be turned upside down right away just by people that don't want to play the game, and they know how to exploit violence. And that's exactly what happened during COVID, and people were shocked. People were just put in their shock factor. They'd never seen anything like this. And then you have the politicians trying to dress up nothing that weren't not anything other than riots and theft and destruction, and they tried to put it as lawful protests. And so, we just lost our bearings that way, and we realized, holy crap, we don't have the protections in place that we thought we did. And if something does happen, a lot of the perpetrators are going to be let out right away. Then you have the situation internationally that you had in Israel. And to me, the interesting part about that is they're very upset about the Israeli response to it, meaning they don't understand the threat. They don't understand what it's like to go. They're thinking they're up against a logical foe.
No, they don't understand. Americans, most of them don't understand the mentality of the Middle East. It's not. It's so different. It's
The only guys that get it are the veterans. The veterans have had to go up against hardcore jihadists, people that don't care, and they don't realize that the civilian population, and I'm going to say this very broadly, I'm not saying everybody, but a vast majority of the civilian population in Gaza is okay with what happened on October 7th. And they were supportive of it. And they live in an environment where Hamas in control has no problem using human shields. And this is all stuff that we saw in warfare. But as I told you, very little of the American public is involved in the military, and they're involved in, they really don't know what's going on in these areas, and they don't understand who you're fighting. Again, do I think the Israelis overstepped their bounds on some things? Sure, everybody does. We did on a lot of the things that we did in the war. Is it intentional? No, I don't believe that there's an intention from the top to do what was intended from the top on Hamas on October 7th. That was pure barbarism. that was, a slaughter, and they're calling for the annihilation of Israel. And what's really,
What pisses me off is how people call rapists and kid molesters and murderers freedom fighters. It's beyond me.
yeah, it's ignorance. It's ignorance when they say things like that, because you haven't experienced it. What is really fascinating, though, and I don't think it's been talked about enough, is Israel prior to October 7th was a very divided country, and they had a lot of political upheaval, and you had a lot of discord and stuff like this. By doing what they did and where they chose to do the attack on the rave, on the concert area with those young kids, that was probably in the most liberal part of Israel. And they completely changed overnight the Israelis from being a divided country to being a completely unified country. They know they have political issues. They'll deal with them later. They're not happy about the fact that they think that maybe the politicians didn't protect them well enough against an attack like this. But they're putting that all to the side right now, and they're all focused on taking care of the threat, and they realize what they have. You couldn't have done anything. I don't think you could have done anything that would have mobilized the whole country as much as what happened on October 7th.
No, even Orthodox Jews recruited themselves to the army, where this was never heard of before. So now with everything that's happening, I speak to my husband, and he's like, if you focus on violence, you're gonna attract violence, and he's more subtle in his reaction to this than I do, where I get really hyper vigilant and we need to protect ourselves and all that. And he's like, well, if you focus on violence, you're going to attract violence and the law of attraction and all that. What do you think about that?
I don't know about you, but in my kitchen, I'm required to have a little fire extinguisher. It's just the code in our county. Most counties have something like that. Do you guys have an alarm system on your house?
No,
Do you have a fire extinguisher anywhere in your house?
probably.
Yeah. So does that mean, do you lock your doors at night?
I do, yes.
Well, does that mean that you're inviting somebody to invade your house?
No.
I mean, if you're not worried, why lock the doors? And if you're not worried about fire, why have a fire extinguisher? That makes you paranoid. I just, it's funny to me. It's like, it's not that. You go, your preparation is different. If you're prepared for something, meaning, hey, worst case scenario, this could happen. I put these measures in place. Now I don't have to think about it. Now I can live my great life, and I can do it. Because why? Because worst case scenario, I know that if there's a grease fire in my house, I have a fire extinguisher close by with the proper fluids in it to take care of that situation. Or my doors are locked at night, so at least I'm going to get a warning if somebody's trying to get into my house at night, and I can sleep more soundly. It's, to me, prevention is not being paranoid. Are there people that take it to crazy degrees? Absolutely. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about basic preparation. So if you if you understand violence, and you understand how it works, and you understand how the worst people in the world use it, you then you're much more able to live a truly peaceful life, because you know what to avoid at the minimum. You know how to recognize violence before it gets too bad. Most people, I'll talk to them all the time. They'll know something was wrong at point A, but because they didn't either want to be judging or seem like they're being paranoid or something, they let it keep going. And then it gets to a point to where the violence happens and they can't do anything about it. But they knew inherently there was something wrong when they could have left. My job is to make sure that people understand how to deal with your nonverbal cues in your body, to sit there, and if something feels wrong, you get yourself out of there, while you can. If you don't have a choice, if you don't have a place to run, if you have to fight, then yes, I'm going to teach you how to use the tool of violence. I'm going to teach you how to use your body and anything available to you to put injury on the other human being, so they're no longer a threat to you.
Right. So what do we need to avoid, and how do we recognize violence?
Really, the key with that is it's not really how you recognize it, it's how you train for it. So when I train for things with my people, we train in an asocial environment. And what does that mean? That means we're not giving any sort of emotional, communication in any way, shape, or form. There's no verbal communication. There's nothing. It's just silent. And that is the hallmark of asocial violence, no communication when people are about to attack you. And when you get used to training in that environment, you also get used to understanding when things have gone asocial, and you can recognize that. Oftentimes what people want to talk about is they want to talk about all the avoidable situations where they think they need to use violence. Somebody yelled at them, somebody drove them off on the road, all these things that you can just let go, that don't require you. That's when most people want to respond violently or threateningly. It's the exact opposite. And then when they truly are in a situation which requires violence, oftentimes they're so frozen, they just want to talk. They want to try to talk their way out of it. Why are you here? What are you doing? It's too late for that, when the person's to that point. So understanding how to navigate antisocial aggression, which is what most people participate in. Somebody tries to run you or cut you off on the road, you flip them off, you beep your horn, and you get away with it until that one day where the other guy responds and he runs you off the road, comes out and pounds on your car, pulls you out of your car, and beats the crap out of you. I've probably had at least 10 people over the years come to me with that scenario where they were literally run off the road and they had nothing, in the toolbox to deal with anything like that. And yet the whole thing was avoidable. They never had to go there. They chose to respond in a way that provoked violence. So a lot of it is just understanding, it's really, most of us have not been taught, unless you've grown up in violent streets or in a prison situation or if in a very tough neighborhood, you don't understand how to operate in an area where if you screw up, it will be backed up with violence. That's what those neighborhoods do. Those neighborhoods enforce everything with a credible threat of violence. Therefore, you get used to living under that and how you conduct yourself in those situations. And so it's rare for us that live in social, really nice neighborhoods to put ourselves in those environments. And that's why seeking out training, which, educates you on that, and then also puts you in scenarios where you have to deal with asocial violence in a safe way, meaning you're going to be in a learning experience. Whereas if you screw up, you have a chance to do it again. Versus the first time you experience asocial violence, you don't want to be that on the street. You want to have some understanding of it before you have to deal with it.
What kind of training do we need to take? And especially for women, what every woman should learn or know to protect herself?
All right. Well, let me front load it by saying the obvious, because I'm sure people are thinking this. Yes, come train with me if you want to. I cover all these subjects. Yes, buy my book.
Where do people train with you?
I do it all over. Right now, most of my courses right now are in Las Vegas area, but I'm going to start, now that COVID's finally over and I can start traveling again, I'm going to go. I usually go all over the U.S. and I'll go over to international.
Miami.
Oh, Miami! I'll probably be there anyways. So yes,
come to Miami.
I love Miami's great. I love doing Miami. So yeah, that. But I'll tell you, an easy thing that your people can do right now is probably the biggest change in my training over the years is the most important thing to understand first and foremost is human nature. And I don't mean that in a airy-fairy kind of way, or hey, no. You need to understand humans. You need to understand their archetypes, how they are, and you have to understand dangerous humans and also humans that are not. You have to understand all aspects of human nature. One of the best ways to do that, and the more entertaining ways to do that, is to get Robert Greene's book, Human Nature.
Okay. I really like this guy.
It's a fantastic book. Now, his other books are great. 48 Laws of Power, all of that. The 48 Laws of Power was written because he was a script writer in Hollywood, and he saw when people were trying to get their scripts done, how harsh Hollywood was and the harsh Hollywood environment. And he understood all these different personality types. And that's why he wrote the book. He didn't write the book to teach you how to become one of those. He taught you he wrote the book to teach you how to recognize these things and what's being and the tactics they use against you. In the human nature book, he took it even a step further for all of humanity. And those are probably two great things that you can do to really arm your mind, and you can you'll start recognizing people in your life right away. Women, as far as domestic violence, is probably one of the best things they can ever do, is to really understand human nature, because they will see archetypes of people that, and it's usually obviously somebody in your immediate social circle or family circle where the majority of the domestic violence happens. The random attacks, even though now we're seeing a huge increase in Europe over there because of the immigration issues, we're seeing huge changes in attacks on rape and stuff like that, where it's happening from random attacks rather than within your friend group or family group. So that would be something that everybody listening to this could do today with no repercussions. Really easy thing to do. Just start, reading and learning, get the audiobooks, and that will really, really help you. The other thing I want to do is I just want to clarify, because I might have sounded a little flippant when I was talking about people worrying about focusing on violence and bringing it in their lives. I understand what they're talking about. I think there's a misnomer, though. Understanding violence and learning how to protect yourself is one thing. The people that I think that is true are those that, and I see it all the time, mostly among young guys, that they train and then they're almost looking for it. They're almost looking for a fight all the time. They're seeking it out. And my big thing with people all the time is I tell them all the time, I go, don't go looking for it, because it will find you. And I said, it will find you at the worst possible time when it comes out. So violence is not anything you seek out. What I tell people is, when I try to get it across to new groups, I'll usually say something to the group like, how many people in here know how to swim? And everybody, whoever can swim can raise their hands. And then I say, okay, keep your hands up, those of you that had to ever swim for your life. And I'm one of those people. I've had to swim for my life twice. I leave my hand up. And surprisingly, there's usually at least one person that had to swim for their life. And then I go to that person. I said, would you ever want to experience that again? And they go, no. They take their hand down right away. And that's what real violence is. Violence is not something that you seek out. So those that sit there and talk about, and mostly this is among males, about when they use violence or they got in a fight and they're bragging about it or something, it's because they chose to use violence in a situation where they had choice and they could have disengaged, and they got away with it. They got away with it and they were lucky. That type of seeking of violence is absolutely stupid, and it will bring it into your life, and it's no way to live, and it's a fast track to prison to be like that. But studying what we're talking about, protecting ourselves, understanding human nature, realizing what predators and the tactics they use, understanding how to use your body to protect yourself, use your mind correctly, how to think about it correctly. It all goes towards first protecting your brain and body. And then what's interesting is once you handle your brain and body, it's much easier then to make everything else, making sure you're locking the doors, you've got the security system, you put away things, you're very vigilant in the basics, because all you want is a predator. With my clients, I can't eliminate violence. There's no chance of doing that. What I want, though, is I want a predator to look at my client, look at their house, look at the way they live, look at the way they carry themselves, and just say, you know what? That's too much work. They're too much work. I'll go on to somebody easier, because predators don't want a challenge. They don't want to go up against somebody that's prepared. They don't want to go up against somebody that's aware. And so if I can get my clients to do the basics that way, that eliminates a good portion of being targeted for violence.
Is there a checklist or things that everybody must do to protect their home?
I tell people the number one thing you can do to protect your house, one of the biggest deterrents that you can get towards criminals in any way, shape, or form, is a dog. People looking, I don't want to have a dog. I understand that. And I'm not talking about a guard dog. I'm not talking about, a well-trained dog. I'm talking about my daughters have this little Lhasa Apso. It's just the most annoying little dog, but nobody comes by the house and we don't know about it. That dog lets everybody know. And that's the one thing. The thing that really stood out to me was here in Las Vegas, we had a horrible robbery of a judge and his wife. They lived in a triple gated community. That means you had to go through 3 gates to get to the the part of their property. It was invaded, a home invasion. They were sure that this guy had, in a safe that he had in his house, they were sure that he had a bunch of gold and silver, which he did not have. He just had, papers and stuff like that. They were completely misinformed. They beat him into within an inch of his life in front of his wife. They also beat his wife, not as badly, but she had to sit there and watch it. The guy had a long, long recovery. The most interesting part, though, of that horrible situation was when the detectives tracked these guys down and got them. When they broke into their apartment, they saw up on they had various neighborhoods that they had hit. When they got to the neighborhood where the judge was, they saw the same thing. They saw all these X's through all these houses that were in that neighborhood. Every one of those X's represented a house that had a dog.
Wow.
They wouldn't go after anything that had a dog because they can defeat systems, security systems. They can pick locks. They can get in. None of that intimidates them, but they cannot shut a dog up. And that dog gives you that early warning, to get up and something's wrong. That's annoying. So, I mean, it's inconvenient for a lot of people because a lot of people don't want to have pets because of their lifestyles. But all I can do is pass on, just the best facts that I find. And that is something across the board. When I talk to all my friends in law enforcement, that's just a standing issue that they will do anything to avoid a dog. And not for the reasons we think. We all think it's because they're scared of the dog. Well, it's not. That can be a factor depending on the dog. But it's because the dog cannot be silenced easily.
Yes. Anything else besides the dog? Like, what do you do when you're on vacation and you leave the house and your car is not there?
Yeah. Oh God. The number one. Well, okay. These are the number one problem right here. Because what do? I am shocked at how everybody lives their life on their damn phone, and they tell you where they are all the time. I'm here. I'm real time. My family knows if they're going to post anything about where we are, it's going to be when we're back home and we're gone. We're not going to do anything. Obviously, people have really gotten away from getting to know their neighbors. We've been able to do that in my area, so it's great. We all look after each other's houses. We let everybody know when we're going to be gone, what's going on. I'm fortunate. I live in a great neighborhood. The real thing is just preparation, just not, if you get, not too many people get papers delivered anymore and your mail and all of that. So, you just don't want to leave any obvious signs that you're not around when you're gone. And the other thing too is, especially if it's women, as far as being targeted for sexual assault or anything like that in neighborhoods, if your husband's gone a lot or whoever you're living with is gone a lot, they're going and you're being watched. That's one thing that's really important. They want to see when you're alone, when are your times. We had a lot of people that were getting during the pandemic. And then of course we had it happen before the crash in 2008, where a lot of high-end neighborhoods were getting home invasions. And the easiest way they were getting in is they're waiting for the wife to come back from either being out, maybe she was doing yoga or she was coming back from work or she's coming back from like grocery store, leaving the door open as she's emptying out the car. And that's when these guys would get in. They would come in under the door and doing things like that. A lot of what I'm talking about is very basic, but the question to ask yourself is not like, oh, I've heard this before. The question to ask yourself is, are you doing it?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the problem. Most people, yeah, I know that. Yeah, I know you know that. Are you doing it? And that's where you find people slipping through the cracks because it didn't happen yesterday, what I try to do is I try to identify all these things and most people can identify them for themselves where you're taking unnecessary risk. And the term I use for that is you're basically sleeping with your head on a railroad track and you got away with it last night. The train didn't come by and hit you. So you're fine. So you keep putting your head on that railroad track because it's convenient. Maybe it saves you. Maybe it's that shortcut through the really bad neighborhood that saves you 15, 20 minutes on the commute home. Maybe it's going to the ATM at 11 o'clock at night because you just don't want to get up 20 minutes earlier in the morning to get the stupid cash that you need for the kids, in the morning for whatever they got going on. And this is when everything happens. I show video of this all the time and you can tell these people that are doing these acts, going to the ATM at night or whatever. It's not the first time they've done it. You can tell how comfortable they are doing this. And it's something that they've got away with for quite some time. And yet they're taking this unnecessary risk. And then one night it happens, you know? So again, is that being paranoid, or is that just being smart? You know, just saying, you know what, it's not worth it for me to go out this time of night, get gas, do whatever. I'm going to, as much as I don't want to, I'm going to set my clock 45 minutes earlier tomorrow morning. I'm going to get up and I'm going to do that in the morning, you know, and that 99% of the threat goes away when you do that.
What about carrying firearms, training in firearms? And if so, how do we keep it safe from our kids?
The disclaimer on this is I own a business here in Las Vegas. It's called Machine Guns Vegas. It's a tourist shooting place. I have a Class 7 manufacturer's license from the ATF. That means I can make machine guns. And my company, we have that ability. So I just want to lay this out before I say what I'm about to say. I'm also, you know, I have a concealed carry. I've been training for years, all of that. It is a very personal decision. It is not a buy it and forget it type of a purchase. If you are going to take on the responsibility of a firearm, you have to ask yourself if you're going to train. And that doesn't mean all the time. It doesn't mean that you're a lifestyle or you're a competitive shooter. But are you going to put the time into learning how to properly use the weapon, take a course, you know? And I mean, a course, like even a weekend course, a couple of weekend courses over the year can be huge. You know, you may get to the point to where you enjoy it. It is. A lot of people find it really fun, and it's challenging. It's fun to learn firearms. But you know, are you going to do that? Then, as far as securing it, yes, we have I have probably 3 safes in my house, but that's because I have a lot of different types of firearms. There's a safe right up by my my nightstand, and that's what carries my firearm that I have for home defense. And that's right by me and everything. My wife also is very well trained.
That's awesome. Dark middle of the night, how do you open the safe?
It's just I 2 ways. I have a touch ability. I have fingerprint ability to open it, and then I have a code, real quick code that I can get in. Worst case scenario, and it will both work regardless of power. So yeah, so it's great. So the kids can't get near it. But the other thing too is you have to. I'm a huge believer in taking kids out as young as possible and let them see what firearms can do. It takes away the curiosity. Meaning, you know, shooting. I remember my grandfather did it by shooting a watermelon with us and stuff, and we had no question after that. It's mostly the kids that get in trouble, or the kids where it's a curiosity and they don't get to see it. Once they understand what something does, it usually makes a really big impression on them, you know? So again, educating kids, telling them, you know, that's a loaded firearm, teaching them the 4 rules of using a firearm, you know, basically that it's, you know, you don't point a firearm at anything that you don't want to destroy. You always want to check your background. You treat all guns as they're loaded. You know, all those little basics that you tell the kids at an early age, they just understand that. Now, a lot of people think, oh my God, it's going to scare them. No, it's not. Kids love stuff like that. You're not presenting it in a violent manner. You're presenting it in just hey, this is how, same thing you would do with a hot stove or anything else. You know, hey, the stove can make great, you know, great food for you, but it can also really hurt you if you don't understand how to use it and stuff. So
How early is early? How early did you expose your kids to firearms? Well, I guess in your household it's a little different.
it is, but my kids were exposed to it probably around 5. They weren't shooting guns or anything like that, but they were exposed to what guns are. You know, my wife is she's now the assistant sheriff here in Las Vegas, so she's, you know, number 3 at the agency, and so they've seen my wife carry all their life. I've carried concealed. They're just used to seeing.
I want to meet your wife. She sounds like a nice lady.
Oh, she's great. Yeah, she's awesome. We've just been very practical with the kids on that, you know, because they're going to see mom carrying, they're going to see dad carrying, but we don't make a big deal out of it. We don't, you know, they understand everything. But again, it is you're bringing something into your life that, again, you have to be responsible for, meaning every bullet that comes out of that gun is your responsibility. And you have to really understand what that means. And it's a personal thing. I have no problem. I want everybody to have the right to own a firearm. I just think that right comes with a little bit of responsibility. And because many people, one of the biggest gun thefts in the world are people who just leave their guns in their cars. They're very lackadaisical with them. Any of the shootings that you see as far as kids getting a hold of guns, usually it's because the parent didn't secure it properly. And there's something there. But again, that's not a reason to shut down, responsible gun ownership. It's just what we need to do is you need to really severely enforce any rules against those that break rules like that and do stupid stuff. But you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. A firearm is a really great equalizer. If you know how to use it properly, it can be a tremendous self-defense weapon. But again, it has to be a comfort level, and not everybody's comfortable with that type of responsibility.
Yes. Amazing. Wow, I can speak with you for a very long time, but I want to be respectful of your time. Before we say goodbye for now, what are your 3 top tips to living a stellar life?
There is no tomorrow. And what do I mean by that? I mean, I'm sitting here realizing how quickly my wife and I have been together now 20 years, and we laugh because it feels like yesterday. And yet, we've caught ourselves in the last couple of years. Oh, we were always going to do X, Y, or Z. And now we're just doing it. We're taking those family trips because both of us are incredibly busy. And it's easy for us to say tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. Well, I've had friends unexpectedly, unfortunately, pass away. I've had friends killed and stuff like that. And you just realize we're making this assumption that we're going to have all this time and everybody's going to be healthy. And you look at your kids and they're great markers because, man, they grow up so fast, So I think first and foremost, just make time, make time for those events. We just got back from taking the kids to Europe for a spring break, and they had never been out of the country. And it was great. And they really, really liked it. And we looked at each other and just shook our heads, why haven't we done more of this? So number one, that. Number two, take care of your health. I mean, all my friends that are doing a lot of my friends just let that go. They didn't take care of themselves in any way. And you don't have to be like a workout maniac. You don't have to be a CrossFitter or anything like that. But just taking good basic care of yourself is really key, because when you start to if you lose your health due to poor maintenance, you're going to really kick yourself. You're going to be, things that you could have done. And again, we somehow put all that kind of stuff last. And then probably the last thing is truly understand. I'm going to go back to what I suggested for everybody. Really, if you want to have a very happy life, truly understand human nature. If you understand human nature, you're never going to be surprised by human nature. And you're not going to be depressed. Marcus Aurelius had this quote. I'm going to screw it up because it's not perfect. I can't remember it verbatim. But basically, he got up every morning and said, I know today people are going to fail me. I know they're going to lie to me. I know they're going to do X, Y. He said all these things about what could possibly happen. He said, but it's not going to cause me to lose hope in humanity and have a great day, basically. So we prepare ourselves in reality by understanding human nature, but we have a great life despite those challenges that we're going to have, And so those 3 things, I think, if you employ them early enough in your life, I think will really make a big difference.
Yeah, I think prepare yourself for reality, but also prepare yourself for miracles and having life be exceeding your expectations and your wildest dreams.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where can people find you and train with you? And please come to Miami again.
Probably the best place for them to go is surviveviolence.com. That'll get them there. I have a report there. If you liked what we talked about, there's just a PDF. That's all it is. Doesn't cost anything. It's all free. And it talks about all these things. And then you can find me, really, if you just put Tim Larkin in on Google, I pop up everywhere. I have a podcast that's all over my YouTube channel. I also have my IG, and all that stuff is listed. If you go to Protect.
And a great TED Talk.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you just go to any one of those, I try to put all that content up on each one of those platforms.
Perfect. Wow, I really appreciate you. Thank you so, so much for being here. And thank you for taking a stand fearlessly and helping so many people to live a better life.
Well, I appreciate you letting me talk to your audience.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners. Remember, there is no tomorrow. Make time for your loved ones today. Take care of your health. Truly understand human nature and have a stellar life. This is Orion. Till next time.